Hey everyone, it's Tyler from Zephyr Epic here, and today we are going over the 2023-24 Upper Deck Series 2 Young Guns checklist and giving you our thoughts on the players. So sit back, relax, and let's get right into the breakdown, starting off with how we are going to grade the players, and we're using a letter grade guide system for this. Starting things off, we have the A grade, which is reserved for first line forwards or top 5 defensemen in the NHL or elite goalies. Then we have the B grade, which is a top 6 forward, a top 2 defenseman that can score, or a starting goalie. Then we have the C plus tier, which is a top 9 forward, a top 4 defenseman that can score a lot, or a tandem goalie, so kind of like a 1B style goaltender. Then we have the C grade, which is just a bottom 6 forward or a bottom 4 defenseman. And then the C minus grade, which represents 4th line forwards, bottom pairing Ds, backup goalies. And then the D tier, which is essentially just replacement level. These are players that I don't think really have too much of a shot of, a lengthy NHL career. They're kind of in the replacement level range where they might fill in, they might not, but probably not someone to worry about. Generally speaking, I try and evaluate every player from a hobby value standpoint, and it can be a little bit tough to do so because there's a lot of factors, but the things that I look out for are what their hype is heading into the set, what their realistic potential is, what their peak ceiling is, and what their long-term outlook is, along with some other factors like what team they play for, because that can drive their value a lot. At the end of the day, there are going to be some very impactful NHLers in every single Young Gun review that we do that just don't put up a ton of points, and as a result, don't get that high of a grade. Two other things to keep in mind is that I generally give a little bit more generous grades to goalies, as because when they go on a hot streak in the NHL, their value tends to go up really quickly, especially in the playoffs. We see it every single year. So that's why you'll see some goalies get a little bit more of a generous grade. And then defensemen, on the flip side of things, because they don't typically get as many points, typically have a lower game, even if they're going to be a more impactful player at the NHL level than an equivalent forward. Just because, again, points are what drives sales, and that's what drives their hobby value, so you'll see them kind of just rank lower as a result. As per usual, this is just a guide. You may have different opinions, and that is totally fine. If you have any questions as to why I graded a player a certain grade, feel free to leave a comment. I will do my best to respond to it with the reasoning why, because there are a lot of differentiating opinions, and not everyone's going to be right. I'm not going to be right 100% of the time. I wish I was, because I would probably be in an NHL front office as a GM or a scout, and that would be pretty sick, I'm not gonna lie. But anyways, let's get into the guide here, and just a quick note, it is divided into chapters, so if you want to skip ahead to your favorite team or to Chicago to see what kind of spicy grade I gave Connor Bedard, feel free to do so. They'll be linked in the description below as well for you to click through, and I think on the timeline as well, whatever YouTube handles it. So yeah, let's get underway with the Anaheim Ducks. Leo Carlsson leads things off for the Anaheim Ducks, and he gets an A from me. I think he's just going to net out as a really good first-line forward. I don't think he has quite the upside or highlight reel potential to hit that A+ tier. But yeah, overall, I just really like his game. I think he's going to be that legit first-liner. I like how Anaheim has chosen to develop him by giving him some gym days early on in the year to let him build up his strength. I think this all bodes really well for his success moving forward. I just think that upside's a little bit limited, and he'll just be a really, really good first-liner. So an A from me. Pavel Mintyukov comes in at an A- for me, and I view him as the best defender in the 2023-24 rookie crop in general. I think he's better than Luke Hughes, and I also think he's going to get a ton of opportunity to be the franchise #1 defenseman in Anaheim, and the early returns on his play are extremely good. His underlying numbers are great. He looks absolutely electric out there. Truly a special talent on defense, and I think he could challenge for those top 10 defenseman lists as soon as a couple of years from now. So keep your eye out for him. I think he's very, very, very talented, and a very big part of why I think the Anaheim Ducks are going to be a super scary team in 2 to 3 years from now. Next up is Tristan Luneau, who nets out at a B- for me. I really like his game. I think he's got top 4 defenseman potential. I think he can score a lot. I just think he's going to be overshadowed by Owen Zellweger and Pavel Mintyukov on the Anaheim blue line. They're going to be a very scary team, let me tell you that. So yeah, B- for me. Really like his game. Kind of similar spot to like Sam Girard in Colorado, where he's going to be a really, really good defenseman. So yeah, like his game. And finally, we have Jackson Lacombe, who comes in at a C-, and honestly, I really like his game. I think he's going to be an NHL defenseman. It's just he's going to be overshadowed by his fellow teammates in Anaheim, and also his scoring upside isn't quite there to really get above a C-. It's also worth noting he's Anaheim's only young gun canvas in the set, which means we'll likely see both Leo Carlsson and Pavel Mintyukov's young gun canvas in extended series when it comes out sometime later in the year. One final note I have here is that the Anaheim Ducks are poised to be a top team in the NHL in 3 to 5 years from now. I really like their group of young players led by Mason McTavish, Leo Carlsson, Pavel Mintyukov, Tristan Luneau, Owen Zellweger, and Cutter Gauthier. They have one of the best goalie prospects in Lucas Dostal. So yeah, just keep your eye out for them, because if they start having a ton of playoff success, you're going to see their value start to go up a little bit more too. Next up, we have the Arizona Coyotes, who have one base young gun, and that is Michael Kesselring. He is a very solid defender, but has limited scoring upside, so he gets a C+ from me. While it is a bit disappointing that Logan Cooley's base young gun is going to be in extended series and isn't in series 2, it is worth noting that you can at least find his young gun canvas in series 2, so you can look forward to collecting that. If I were to put a grade on him, I would give him an A+, just because he has the really high-end skill potential, but I would say that he's a little bit more volatile than Leo Carlsson and Adam Fantilli, so his floor is definitely lower than those two. The Boston Bruins are up next, and they had two of the toughest players for me to evaluate. Kicking things off with Matthew Poitras, I have him at an A-, but you could rank him anywhere between an A and a B, and I would totally see the justification for it. I think if it was on any non-major team and it wasn't the Bruins, I probably would have had him at a B+, but because it's the Bruins and they tend to get a little bit extra out of their players, I have him at an A-. He's had a really solid rookie campaign that got cut short due to an injury, but again, yeah, just really like him. Being 19 years old, doing what he did in the NHL is a really positive sign for him being a top 6 forward. And I think he does have that legit first line upside. I just think it's a little bit more limited than other players. I like John Beecher as kind of a third line forward type of player, so he gets a C for me. And then we get to Mason Lohrei, who is the toughest player for me to evaluate in the entire checklist. I think you could have him at a B-. I also think you could have him at a C- because his offensive tool set is definitely there. He scores a ton of points wherever he goes, but his underlying numbers are a little bit scary. And it's kind of one of those, it just depends on what you view him as and whether or not he gets the opportunity in the Bruins organization due to injury. So I think there's a chance that he gets the reins in a top 4 role and runs away with them. But also I think the most likely scenario is that he ends up as kind of, a 4, 5, 6 defenseman on the team that does really good things on a power play. So that's why he gets a C tier for me, but it is worth noting that he does have the potential to move up. I would say he's probably the biggest boom or bust player in this entire checklist. The Buffalo Sabres have one base young gun, but it is a doozy, and it is Zach Benson, who gets an A from me. I do think he does have light A+ potential, but overall nets out as an A. I still don't know how he fell to 13th overall at the draft last year, but hey, Buffalo's pretty happy there. He's had a really good year for them. I, again, really like his game. He's got a lot of compete, does a lot of the right things. So I think he's just going to be a mainstay in the first line for NHL teams for many, many years to come. Also worth noting that he is in the canvas set along with Devin Levi, so worth noting that they have two really good young gun canvases. The Calgary Flames have 3 base young guns in the set. Connor Zary leads them off at an A- for me. Honestly, he has surpassed what I expected for him to do at the NHL level. He has been phenomenal for the Flames this year, been a real breath of fresh air for them. The team loves him, the city loves him, so I wouldn't be shocked to him get a ton of hobby love early on. I think he nets out as a low-end first-line forward, high-end second-line forward, but hey, if he keeps playing the way he has, there's a chance for him to get bumped up to an A or an A+. Next up, we have Walker Duehr, who I have as just a solid bottom 6 forward. He's kind of struggled this year after a bit of a good year last year, but yeah, bottom 6 forward for me. And then rounding things off is Ilya Solovyov, who again is just a defenseman. I don't think he's going to put up a ton of points. He might get some NHL minutes, so a C- from me. The Carolina Hurricanes have no young guns or young gun canvases in the set, so let's flip the page to the Chicago Blackhawks, who, well, they have that Connor Bedard guy. Bedard comes in as an S+, which is reserved for the once-in-a-generational talents like Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid. Truly, those are the only other 2 people that I would have put in this tier in terms of modern sports cards for hockey. Really, nothing more needs to be said. He has absolutely lived up to the hype. And honestly, there's a point where you're actually a little bit concerned about the hype because his base rookie cards are actually outselling the equivalent Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid cards. And that leads us to the question of what his young gun's going to be valued at, because if those are valued at $1,000 raw, is his young gun actually going to be $1,000 raw on release day? I have no idea. It's going to be a fascinating bidding war to watch. We know he's going to break the day one record for a base young gun sale because that belongs to Alexis Lafreniere, who sold for $400 back when his young gun came out in 2020. So yeah, just something to keep an eye on, a little bit of hockey card history upon us in a couple of weeks. Moving on to Kevin Korchinski, I think he'll net out as a really solid first pairing defender, so he gets a B+. I actually originally had him as a B, as I don't think he has the talent to be an A-level defender, but the fact he's going to be given every opportunity to be Chicago's long-term franchise defenseman bumped him up to a B+ for me, just because when a player gets that many reps, they do have the opportunity to move up a tier. So yeah, that's kind of explains his rating for me. And rounding things off is Luke Phillip, who is also Chicago's only young gun canvas, which means you'll have to wait for extended series for Bedard's young gun canvas. But Luke Phillip comes in at a C. He's had a rather unique path to the NHL, as he's one of very few NHL forwards to come through U Sports. There is some scoring upside there, so you may want to keep a copy or two tucked away just in case he somehow clicks with Connor Bedard. But given that he's 28 and has missed the entire season so far due to Achilles surgery, it's more likely that he nets out as a bottom six forward. The Colorado Avalanche have no young guns, which is made up by the fact that the Columbus Blue Jackets have 6. Of the 6, I'd really only focus on Dmitry Voronkov and Stanislav Svozil. Voronkov has emerged as a legit top 6 forward option for them this year. I like his game, his underlying numbers are pretty strong, so I think it's pretty safe to call him as a B tier player. Stanislav Svozil, on the other hand, does have some offensive upside, but I just don't think it's quite enough to get him into that B tier. It's a C+ for him from me. Samuel Knashko is another solid defenseman that I like, but he just doesn't have the offensive upside, so a C-. While I think Mikhail Putra does have a decent offensive skill set, he's yet to put together a strong enough season to make me want to bump his grade up from a C-. And then both Tyler Engel and Billy Sweezy will likely be AHL tweeners. In terms of young gun canvases, they have Svozil, Sweezy, and Jet Greaves, who is a goalie from Series 1, who really isn't a big name either. Obviously, the biggest elephant in the room here is that Adam Fantilli doesn't have his base young guns nor his young gun canvas in Series 2, so we'll likely have to wait for extended series for those. In fact, Adam Fantilli actually has no cards on the checklist for the hobby side of the product. You can find 3 different cards in retail products like Blasters and Tins, which are his 1994-95 rookie die cut, his 2023-24 rookie commemorative class, and his OPG glossy rookie cards. The Dallas Stars have a single young gun, and that is Matt Murray, who's a goalie with fairly limited upside, so he gets a C- just mainly because he's a goalie, and if he does somehow get into the playoffs and pop off, his value will skyrocket. But for the most part, I expect him to be an AHL, NHL tweener, kind of like a third string guy. The Detroit Red Wings do not have any young guns, but the Edmonton Oilers do have one, and he's a pretty interesting one at least. It's Raphael Lavoie. I have him at a C+. I originally had him as a B-, but knocked him down a little bit, mainly just because he hasn't really shown the scoring touch at the NHL level. But that being said, he does have a pretty good pedigree, and I think you'll see some hype around him, as with any Oilers forward. On the off chance that they end up clicking with Connor McDavid, they're going to get a lot of points, and their value is going to go up, so just something to keep in mind. But in general, I think he's just going to be a pretty solid top 9 forward if he hits at the NHL level. Next up are the Florida Panthers, and we'll start things off with Mackie Samoskevich. I quite like his opportunity to be a top 6 forward at the NHL. His game's pretty solid. He's produced pretty solid at every single level he's played at. So I have him at a B-. And then speaking of B-, I also have Justin Sordiff there. I've been a big fan of Sordiff's game ever since he played for the Vancouver Giants. I think he's more likely a C+ than a B-, but he does have a bit of top 6 potential, so that's why he got that B- for me. But yeah, and then finally we have Uvis Balinskis, who is kind of a depth defender, kind of AHL, NHL tweener. Next up are the LA Kings, and they have Alex Laferriere. I actually quite like his game. I think he'll be kind of a third line forward, bottom 6 forward. I gave him a C though, just because I think his offensive upside is a little bit more limited, but they seem to really like him, so you could have him anywhere in the C to C+ range, and I'd be totally fine with it. Next up are the Minnesota Wild, and they have 3 young guns. Damon Hunt is the one that's most interesting, but he's a defenseman that I don't think has the most offensive upside, so he gets a C-. And then Damian Giroux and Nick Sweeney are both kind of AHL, NHL tweeners. The Montreal Canadiens have two young guns in Joel Teasdale and Lucas Condotta, but neither of them are anything spectacular, so they both get Ds. The Canadiens also have one young gun canvas in Sean Farrell. However, I'm a little bit lower on him than the start of the year, as he's kind of had a bit of a slow season so far. Next up are the Nashville Predators, who have Mark Del Gaizo, and he's a defenseman with some offensive upside, so I gave him a C. The New Jersey Devils don't have any base young guns, but they do have a Luke Hughes young gun canvas that people will definitely be chasing after. The New York Islanders also don't have any base young guns, but they do have a William Dufour young gun canvas. I have cooled on him a little bit as well since Series 1, as he's only got 15 points in 36 games in the AHL this year. The New York Rangers don't have any young guns or young gun canvases in Series 2, and the Ottawa Senators have two young guns, with one being Maxence Gounet, who has a little bit of upside, but he still comes in at a C-, and then Nicholas Matipalo, who is a defenseman who just, I think, is going to be an AHL-NHL tweener. They do have two young gun canvases, one being Levi Merilainen, and he is a little bit intriguing, the other being Gounet. So Merilainen might be one that you want to stash just because he's a goalie, and again, he could pop off. The Philadelphia Flyers have one base young gun in Emile Andre. He is an undersized defenseman, so if he's going to make the NHL, he's going to get some points probably, but overall, I just don't see him making it, and he'll probably be an AHL-NHL tweener. They also have Elliot Desnoyers as a young gun canvas, but he's kind of struggled in the AHL this year, so he's not going to be the most sought-after player. The Pittsburgh Penguins have two base young guns, one being John Ludwig. I like his game a decent amount, and I think he'll get a lot of opportunities there as they go through a bit of a retool, so I gave him a C+. And then they have Ryan Shea, who is an older defenseman who just doesn't have a ton of offensive upside and is likely to spend a lot more time in the AHL, so I gave him a D. The San Jose Sharks have one base young gun in Ty Emberson, and he's actually pretty solid as a defenseman, all things considered, and especially considered the team he's playing for, but his offensive upside is a little bit limited, so I gave him a C-. The one thing to note here is Daniel Gushin in the young gun canvas set. I actually really like his game. He's, again, almost a point per game player in the AHL this year. There's a lot of potential upside there, and honestly, I do not get why he's not in the NHL. The Sharks simply just don't have 12 forwards better than him, in my opinion. Next up are the Seattle Kraken, and they have Ty Cartier as one of their young guns. I gave him a B- just because he hasn't performed to the level that he was in the playoffs last year. But overall, there's still a lot of potential there for him to be a top 6 NHL forward. I just think the hype's kind of died down a little bit at this point, hence the B-. But yeah, still should be a pretty solid NHLer, and there is a chance for him to be a top 6 forward. The St. Louis Blues have Hugh McGing, who's probably just going to be an AHL-NHL tweener. And the Tampa Bay Lightning have two young guns in Waltteri Merella and Matt Tompkins, but neither of them are super spectacular. I think Merella could carve out a bottom 6 role in Tampa Bay, but Matt Tompkins just hasn't really posted the strongest numbers wherever he's played, so he gets a D. Next up are the Toronto Maple Leafs, who have two pretty interesting young guns. I think Fraser Minton, talent-wise, is closer to the C+ tier, but he gets a slight bump up to B-, as he does have enough of a CHL track record to get some hype from the major market that is Toronto. Bobby McMahon has been on a tear recently. However, given his track record and age, I would say it's pretty unlikely that he ends up as more than anything than a really solid bottom 6 forward. He's 28 years old already, and really his most prolific scoring season was just last year in the AHL, which you'd kind of expect from someone who is a good bottom 6 forward, being a point per game in the AHL at the age of 27. So that's why I have him at a C grade. Obviously, his value is going to be a lot higher at release. But again, when you look at his track record and historical comparables, it would be extremely rare if he ended up as anything more than a really solid bottom 6 forward for an extended period of time. So that's why he has a C grade for me. And again, personally, if I were to pull either Minton or McCann, I would lean towards selling them sooner rather than later, as I think their release day value will likely exceed what their true value will end up being, barring either one of them winning a cup in Toronto, because I think if Toronto ever does win a Stanley Cup, every single player on that team that has a rookie card is going to see it go up in value because people are going to want to collect the rookies of the players that finally won a Stanley Cup for Toronto. On to the Vancouver Canucks, who have Artur Silovs as a base young guns. The Latvian netminder was arguably one of the biggest stories in international hockey last year, helping Latvia secure a bronze medal in the IHF World Championships and being named MVP of the tournament along the way. He started off the year slow in the AHL, but has bounced back to form, so there's definitely reason to believe he can be a solid starting goalie at the NHL level, and he gets a B- from me. The Canucks have Silovs and Cole McWard as young gun canvases. McWard is likely an NHL-AHL tweener defender who won't net out as much more than a bottom pairing guy and probably won't score a ton, so I don't think you need to worry too much about him. The Vegas Golden Knights don't have any base young guns, but they do have Yuri Patera in the young gun canvas set. He is a netminder with decent numbers, but I think he's either third or fourth in line there. So if they run into a lot of injury problems, he might get a call up, but for the most part, I'd probably just give him like a C- grade. The Washington Capitals have 3 base young guns in the set and have the biggest surprise grade with Clay Stevenson getting a B-. Look, I was as shocked as you, but when you look at Clay Stevenson's numbers over the past few years, they've simply been incredible. In his first full season in the AHL this year, he leads the league in both save percentage and shutouts. While he is a little older at 24 years old, there is a lot to like about his track record, and I think he's definitely someone that you'll want to stash a few copies away for should he continue his development path, because he's starting to emerge as one of the best goalie prospects in the sport. Hunter Shepard is a 28-year-old netminder who has some upside, as he's also posted solid numbers in his career, but I think it's a little bit more limited than Stevenson's given the age difference, so he gets a C+ from me. And the final young gun to review is Hardy Hammond Actel, who is a defender that probably won't produce a ton of points and is more likely to be an AHL NHL tweener or depth piece, so he gets a D. And as Hammond Actel was our final young gun to review, that means the Winnipeg Jets don't have any young guns in the set, so let's move on to my top 10 and some general thoughts. For my top 10, I have Connor Bedard at number 1 with a huge gap between him and the next group of players. It's pretty simple. He's a generational talent. He's going to break every single record that we know for hockey card singles on release day. So yeah, easy number 1. Leo Carlsson is the safest pick to be the second highest valued young gun from the set, but I would also not be shocked to see a couple young guns below him pass him at various points, as I think his floor is super high, but his ceiling is a little bit lower than some of them below him. Zach Benson gets the nod for me in third, as I really like his game, and I think he's just going to be a career first line forward, with Pavel Mintyukov coming in fourth. I think Mintyukov has a real chance of being a top 10 defender in the league, if not a top 5 defender, so depending on what his release day price is, you may want to hold on to him. Poitras and Connor Zary are pretty interchangeable at 5 and 6. I just like the Bruins development system a little bit better than the Flames. And then Kevin Korchinski in the 7 spot is the last player that I'd put in that legit chance at being a star tier, as he's going to get a lot of opportunities in Chicago, and after Korchinski, I'd say there's a pretty sizable drop off in player talent and quality. Voronkov's in the number 8 spot for me, and I think his upside isn't as high as some of the players ranked below him, but he's also been pretty solid at the NHL level, so he should have at least a base level of value, even if it's not super high while he's in Columbus. That leads us to Clay Stevenson, who I view as the biggest sleeper in the set. I have him in the number 9 spot simply because he's got a lot of potential, and goalies tend to be valued more when they get hot than any other player. And finally, the 10 spot belongs to Ty Cartier, because honestly, you could argue a lot of different players for this spot, but I think given that he's actually in the NHL in Seattle and is getting the most reps at the NHL level, he's got the best chance of breaking through and becoming a top young gun in the set. In terms of my general thoughts on the young gun class, I think the crop is very top heavy with a lot of sell now players and not a ton of players with potential sleeper upside. The crop is still solid, but if Logan Cooley and Adam Fantilli were both in the product, it would have been one of the best young gun checklists of all time. Don't get me wrong, I think Upper Deck holding them back is fine to make sure Extended had a couple of headliners, but it's just a what if scenario everyone has been playing out the entire season, myself included, because it would have been an absolutely stacked young gun checklist. Also, on that note, we'll have a video at some point in the upcoming weeks looking at who could potentially get a Young Guns and Extended series, and spoiler alert, that checklist might actually end up being really good depending on when the cutoff is and who they decide to include. If you're looking for some cheaper players to speculate on, I'd obviously say Clay Stevenson would be my first pick, but then after him, I'd lean towards Raphael Lavoie, Mackie Semeskovich, and Mason Lohrei, as they seem to have the most boom potential to me. And then maybe after them, you could look at Alex Laferriere, as the Kings organization seems to have a lot of time for him, or Ty Cartier and Pavel Mintyukov, depending on their price on release day. So that's our review of the 2023-24 Upper Deck Series 2 Young Guns checklist. Again, overall, it is a super top heavy product where a lot of the value is just going to come down to whether or not you pull a Connor Bedard in your box. And again, just as a general reminder, use this as a guide, as it is my personal opinion, and I'm probably going to be wrong on some of the players as much as I don't want to be. There's so many variables that go into player development, including opportunity, playing time, injuries, stuff like that it's just really tough to predict. So I try to create a general guide for you to kind of reference and go off of based off my thoughts. And again, some of these players are going to be wrong, some of them are going to be right, and that's totally fine. If you have any comments or questions about players, feel free to leave them in the comment section below and I will do my best to answer them. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to leave a like and maybe considering subscribing to the channel. It helps us out a lot. And we'll see you next week for the release of 2022-23 Upper Deck OPG Platinum, and then on March 6th for the release of Bedard Mania with 2023-24 Upper Deck Series 2. Take care, and I will see you then.